Hello everyone, welcome back to ProAV Live. Thank you all for joining us so close to the end of the year. It is December 22nd and we thought it would be a nice thing to do in our last couple of days of working before the Christmas break to just all sit down together and have a little look back at the year. Look back at 2022, go through each of the videos we did on the channel, each of the new products that were launched, and just sort of have a little chat about them. Which ones really stood out from the crowd, which ones have made a real impact with customers, some of our own personal thoughts and how they've sort of changed the industry a little bit in the last year. What's changed, what hasn't changed as well, because there's a lot that actually stays very similar to how it was at the beginning of the year. But I am not alone for this. I'm joined by our Head of Technical Sales, Richard Payne. How are you, Richard?
I'm fine, thank you. Very much looking forward to this.
And I am joined by our content creator, Nathaniel. How are you doing?
Hello, all good. Very much looking forward to it as well.
So, as we go, obviously, leave any comments, any questions, any thoughts of your own, any products that you want us to talk about, anything like that. Join the conversation. This is not a one-way stream of information. We want to hear what you people watching it think about all of these products as well as just us. But Richard, what are your overall impressions of the year? Before we get started with the nitty-gritty individual products, what has 2022 been like for you?
I think it's been a real sense of getting back to normal.
Well, there's that.
You know, it's after a very topsy-turvy few years. It feels like as we've gone through the year, some of the supply problems which were sort of plaguing our industry earlier have started to evaporate.
Yep.
So that's a really good thing. But there seems to be a sort of increase in releases and innovation. It's been quite an exciting year for product releases. And it seems to be gaining momentum as well.
It has, yeah, it has. I think that 2023 is going to be a good year as well. I think it's been interesting what's been updated and what hasn't in 2022. We've seen a huge amount of live streaming products and PTZs. Pretty much every single major PTZ company has been making big announcements and new releases at the moment. So that's all clearly off the back of the last couple of years of boom in that industry.
Absolutely.
But then also the mirrorless cameras. We've seen so many small cameras released this year, whereas we haven't really seen any larger cameras. I think I was going down through a list of every camera that was released this year that I saw. And the main one that we talked about on the channel was the Canon Affinity H6K. Apart from that, there weren't really any sort of FX9 or C300 kind of style cameras.
Sort of sub 10 grand category.
Exactly, that sort of 4 grand to 10 grand category. There just wasn't that much living in that space this year, whereas maybe the year before we had quite a lot of new things.
Well, bearing in mind that the FX6 and FX9 are still very relevant in that area,
so.
As are the C70, C300, C500.
They were all announced not that long ago, and they're all still very much in the maybe not infancy, but probably middle of their life cycle. These products have a 4-year life cycle or whatever. Yeah. So. Yeah, we probably won't see a new one of any of those next year either. Maybe? I don't know.
I'm not sure. Anyway, we're talking about last year.
Anyway, yes.
So get back on topic,
year.
Carl.
So should we start by going through some of the actual videos that were released on the channel? I thought this was quite a nice way to look back at what the year was like, is to look back at what we've been talking about for the year. And January started with a massive boom from us with the R5C. Pretty much within the first few days of January, Canon dropped the R5C on us. And that was a big product. Really Canon doing things that Canon have never really done before.
8K
internally with no record limits, 8K 60p RAW internally on a small camera that cost like 4 grand. And there's a lot of things that the R5C still does uniquely in the industry, and it's come from Canon. You know, that it's pretty remarkable.
I particularly like the way you can boot it up as a stills camera or a video camera. So it's the two menus are different, and its video features are very similar to the C70 in a lot of ways. So
that's got some stick online because some people don't like the speed at which it swaps. Which is an absolutely fair comment, and there's lots of great hybrid cameras that you can just be in one mode and shoot both stills and video. But the real benefit of having that multiple user interface and booting between the two of them, yes, it is slower, but all the UI changes, so it feels like you're using a C70, and then it feels like you're using an R5. And it really makes a big difference, I think, to the way that you work. If you're doing proper video work, that UI really, really helps instead of the Canon stills UI.
Yeah, I think so too. And the tool set.
Absolutely, yeah. Having things like false color and waveforms and all that sort of stuff in there, and the touchscreen menu. No, there's a lot of benefits of having the full video UI on there. Nathaniel, you've used it quite a bit for the channel, right? And some of the behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
I really like using it. I feel like when I was doing a lot more social media early on in the year, it was great to use the R5C for the still side of things. And then we wanted to do some reels as well for Instagram and other social media platforms. Really good to just switch over, and the settings I had on the video side stayed there, and on the photo side stayed there. So really good, not too big as well. And I kind of like the form factor of it. So yeah, I think in terms of a hybrid camera, I'd probably lean towards an R5C just because of it's really, really capable for video, and also just as good for photos as well. So good, in my opinion, anyway.
Massively so. And I think the image really works for what we do as well. You know, being a technology sort of channel in our marketing, that the R5C has a very clean, crisp look to it, which I think really suits the sort of content that we make. So yeah, we've used it quite a lot on this channel. The C70 and the R5C are probably the two cameras we've used the most on the channel. And then at the same time as that, Canon added RAW to the C70, which was the first of the two major updates that the C70 has had this year, which has really transformed. The C70 in 2021 is not the same C70 as it is now in 2022. Not at all. That camera has had a lot of sort of bang for its buck, as has the FX6 actually, that got its firmware update just a month after that. And the FX6 just continues to dominate in sales. You know, that is by far the most popular camera right now.
It's strange, but I didn't really pay much attention to the FX6 because I was looking at PTZs more, but mainly because we had so many on back order.
Yeah.
It didn't seem much point in having a look at it, and our demo camera was very rarely around. But it was only through getting to know their amazing FR7 PTZ, which we'll come on to later, that I've found a love for the FX6.
And its sensor and image quality. So what happened just after that? So yeah, we did some stuff on the Quasar Science, joined Vitek brand, which is great because it makes those products much more accessible over here in the UK, which is always nice to have some high-end tube lights. And then Panasonic dropped the GH6. Now, you go way back with Panasonic. What are your thoughts on the GH6?
I really love it. It was a very interesting upgrade. The internal ProRes, it took a while before that update came, but it came in the summer, and it was right bang on the date they said they'd release it.
Which is always good, isn't it?
So the fact it can record 5.7K ProRes internally is quite amazing on a camera of this price point. And I think the quality of the codecs, the quality of the sensor, the fact it is the cheapest thing that can do 4K at 120 frames a second internally as well. That's a 10-bit, isn't it, as an internal codec? Absolutely remarkable technology for the money. So yes, I think it was a big upgrade. I like its slightly chunkier style as well. I do like the feel. It
feels nice in your hand, doesn't it?
The quality, the build quality is excellent. And I do like the fact, for my tired old eyes, that it's got an EVF. That's the one thing about the FX 30, which I can't quite cope with, is my arms aren't long enough to get focus on that back screen. I do love a diopter change on an EVF. I also think it helps with stability, and as well as the GH6 having amazing sensor lens stability stabilizer, it also putting it against your eye, having that third point of contact with your hands and your eye actually also aid even with telephoto lenses getting a bit of stability or stabilization, and I've used it with quite long lenses and it almost tripod-like stabilization on that, so that's another impressive area.
It is very impressive. It's a big benefit of that smaller sensor.
Absolutely.
But I mean, do you think people want the smaller sensor?
Well, I think if you've already invested, I mean, there's a hell of a lot of GH series cameras out there, and if you've invested in decent micro four thirds glass, there's a lot of decent micro four thirds glass.
And even if you haven't, it's still quite a nice platform to invest in because the lenses are nice and they're not too expensive.
That's very true. Yes, you can get some incredibly fast 0.95 lenses, can't you, for not an arm and a leg. So I don't think micro four thirds is dead by a long way, and a camera like the GH6 really kicks it forwards. I
mean, the GH6 is their best sort of GH camera that they've ever made, without a doubt. I guess my criticism of it would be actually one of its main strengths, annoyingly, which is the DR boost mode, where you can turn that on, but then you have to be at 2000 ISO, which isn't necessarily a problem. We've had lots of cameras that work better at 2000 ISO before, cameras like the FS7, for example, which was industry standard at its time, also worked better at 12,000 ISO. We made it work. Did help that it had built-in NDs, but we made it work. The problem I have with the GH6 doing it is that it doesn't have built-in NDs. It's designed for that run and gun, you want to be able to use it everywhere kind of work. And it ended up quite noisy at 2000. So you could either choose to have clean pictures with less dynamic range or noisier pictures with nice dynamic range. And that was just sort of always a compromise, which I just didn't find that enjoyable to use. So I guess that's my main criticism of the GH6, and of course all the things that everyone talks about with Panasonic, with the autofocus and contrast-based autofocus system, all the rest
which
of it.
Has improved with the massive improvement in the processor. There's no doubt about it. This is the best autofocus that Panasonic have ever achieved.
Yes, so it has. Yeah,
that's quite impressive.
I would still like to see face detect autofocus in there, but it is, I will concede, the best contrast-based autofocus that I've seen. I know.
But again, with a lot of that glass we were talking about, the micro four thirds lenses, there are a lot of manual lenses.
And a lot of the nicest ones, the ones with the most character, are manual as well.
Yes,
that
exactly.
don't cost a lot of money.
Characterful stuff.
Andreas has said the FX6 is so popular because Canon has not released a C200 Mark II yet. That is a really interesting one. I would love to see a C200 Mark II, but I struggle to see what a C200 Mark II would be that the C300 Mark III or C70 isn't. Because the form factor on the C70 is very different.
You could give it a C70 with an SDI out would be quite good.
But then how are you differentiating that from the C300 Mark III?
It's a very good point. It is
and
the
actually
same
the
sensor.
C300 Mark III is a lot cheaper than the C300 Mark II used to be. It is more expensive than a C200 was, though. Maybe what we want to see is the C300 Mark III come down to a lower price point. Maybe that's what the C200 Mark II could be. Let me know, Andreas. What do you think the C200 Mark II could be? It's the form factor, he says. Absolutely, but the C300 Mark III has the same form factor. What if you took the C300 Mark C70 specs, stuck it in the C200 form factor, you would have the C300 Mark III, basically. So it's a hard one to see what that camera would actually look like. But the C200 is a beautiful camera, and absolutely has its place. I think a lot of those customers have moved to the C70 though.
Me too.
And Stuart Moore is pointing out my rather infancy beard, which is
just
a
such
December.
A trendsetter.
You are a trendsetter. I'm just trying to be like you, Richard.
What Santa? Fat Santa.
Give me a couple of years, I'll work on it.
20 years.
Yes, thanks for pointing that out, Stuart. It's an experiment. It might not be here still in January. I don't know yet. We will see. Should we talk quickly about the Sony lens? Just, it's not, it's a small product in the big scheme of things, but what I do love is that Sony are one of the only brands that are giving us full frame power zoom lenses.
Yep.
And that is absolutely brilliant. We don't have enough of those on the market from any manufacturer.
And we've been telling them for years that it would be a great thing to do.
Absolutely.
So.
But even Sony that are the ones that are doing it, they're doing it inconsistently. They have a brilliant lens like that, but where's its normal focal length equivalent and then its telephoto equivalent?
Yeah, yes, that would be good if they matched. Yeah,
give us a 24-70 f4PZ. It's a very incomplete lineup.
Yeah.
Luca says the C70's lack of an EVF makes it impossible for him, plus the monitor is flimsy. Yes, I miss an EVF as well. Massively miss an EVF. I'm a big fan of an EVF. But a good EVF, that was the trouble with a lot of those previous generation, say FS5, even C200 to an extent. They had rather weak EVFs compared to what we see now in mirrorless cameras. If we had a video camera with an EVF the same quality as we see in the Sony A7S or Panasonic or Canon's new mirrorless cameras, that would be lovely. Really lovely.
Yes.
And Andrea says, have you tried the new Zcam E2 F6 Pro? I haven't tried that one at all. Let me know if you have and what you think. But have you tried the Zcams?
No, I'd like to try any new EVF.
No, that's camera.
Sorry.
The Zcam E2 is their small box camera.
Oh, right.
Bit like the Panasonic BGH1 and that kind of stuff.
Oh, of course, yes.
Yep.
We don't sell those, do we? So
no,
they haven't come on my radar.
No, we don't get asked for them much.
I think they're big in wildlife shoots.
Yes, because they've got so much remote functionality with the Ethernet port. Okay, Affinity. The Mavo Edge 6K, which is there, is one of the most lovely and yet one of the most frustrating cameras in the market. Have you properly filmed with one in earnest yet?
No.
I really need to try and convince you to take one home.
Play with it, but our demo ones have been regularly out with people trying them out. So maybe I'll take one home over Christmas and get to know it. It's interesting. I mean, it's a quirky beast, isn't it?
It's a bit of a quirky beast. It's a bit of one that is sort of it's a bit slower to use rather compared to a lot of the cameras we're used to. It is a cinema camera after all, it's unashamedly almost a cinema camera.
The quality of the images I've seen are absolutely lovely.
And the footage is so easy to work with. If you grade the footage from it,
it is
lovely.
Saying I haven't used it, I did take it for a demo. We used an Arri LF, the Affinity, it was the 8K version of it, and a red Komodo. And the Affinity was so close to the Arri LF in terms of the image quality on a large screen, and it made the Komodo look a little, I guess, it was Super 35 compared with full frame, and its low light abilities and its higher frame rate options just aren't the same. But, the Arri LF obviously was the king of the crop, but the Affinity was really holding its own. I was very impressed with how it looked.
Absolutely. Paraman Chief says, what was your favourite 2022 new product? I mean, well, I guess we'll pick one as we go through this. He says his was the A7 Mark IV, but that, as he realised a second after that actually came out in 2021. So that doesn't count. We'll keep that in mind as we go through, try and pick a favourite maybe each at the end. But yeah, the Affinity, I mean, it's got so many strengths to it. I think the reason that it hasn't been much more popular than it is a simple one. And I think it's a more higher end camera than people perhaps want from a brand like Affinity at the moment. I think they needed to have a modern big success at the mid-range level before coming along with these, which are really quite high-end cameras.
Yeah.
And for what they can do and the products that they compete against, like the Arris and all the rest of it, they are incredibly low price, but they're still, £8,000 cameras. I think if they'd made an amazing camera down at the £3,000 to £4,000 level, I think.
But maybe
that
it wouldn't
have
have the build
popular.
quality. I mean, that's what's most impressed us about it. The fact the build quality has come on leaps and bounds from the previous generation of Affinity. Down to, I know our engineers taken it apart to have a look at the sort of quality of internal components, and he's been very impressed with every element of the build, and that does cost money.
It does cost money. And the feature set, the internal variable NDs, the frame rates that it can do. We can do ProRes 444. There's not many cameras that can do ProRes 444.
But of course, it can't do RAW internally. And that, Red's...
Well, the new firmware is going to give it Cinema DMG internally, but some people love Cinema DMG. I find it quite a pain to work with, really. But it's better than not having RAW in there.
True,
but
that's very true.
I just think I would end up picking ProRes 444. I mean,
I
it's
think
lovely
so
to
too.
use.
Yeah, certainly you can push it quite a long way in a grade.
Okay, then Amaran, the tubes and the flex panels. Now, this is something that I think this was one of Aperture's biggest launches for maybe even a year or so.
We saw these at BSC, was that right?
We did have them on the stand at BSC, yes. So they're both on their Amaran line, almost weirdly so. I still think that the flexible panels should really be in their Aperture lineup rather than their Amaran lineup. But for years and years and years, I've had customers asking me, why don't Aperture make a flexible LED and why don't Aperture make a tube light? And now they do. In fact, they now make several, and I think there's more to come, I'm sure, from them. I really hope there's more to come. But that was huge because that was a launch that so many people have been waiting for. Nathaniel, you've used them a fair bit, right? In fact, you own some of them.
Yeah. To me, because other brands have made similar kind of flexi lights or tube lights before, but the big selling point for me with the Amaran ones is being able to use Sidus Link. I think it's really massive. Being able to control all your lights and have them all in one place.
Is all of your lighting kit Aperture now? So you can use Sidus Link across the board? Yes,
I've got the Amaran 100D, 200D, and then the smaller MC. And then, having addition of the flexi panel, I think it's just so easy to, especially if you're doing a lot of one-man band stuff, being able to control things on your phone and then just, instead of always going to check or adjust your settings, it's really useful. So I was really excited when Aperture or Amaran announced those back then.
So do you have the flexes or do you have the tubes?
The flexes, yeah.
Flexes. And the Sidus Link stuff, do you actually find you use that day in, day out on your shoots that you're going on with it, or is that sort of something that you thought was going to be really useful and wanted to make sure your lights had it, but in reality you don't use that much?
No, I generally do. I find I use it more on long form shoots. If I'm doing a lot of interviews or the live streams, I really enjoy kind of stepping back and being able to finely tune everything rather than before I'd go up to the light, physically change it, come back and not really able to see. So I do use it quite a bit.
So you do the classic standing behind your monitor with it up on your phone, controlling each light in turn. Excellent. It's a really nice system. So that's Amaran. I mean, the more lights they can add to their system in different shapes, different sizes, different styles, the better, really. Okay. Hollyland. Now, this is a bit more of a niche product. This is certainly not going to be the most exciting product of 2022 for a lot of people. But we've had so much interest from customers on this little headset, right, Richard?
I know. No, absolutely. And the huge advantage, of course, is you don't need a base station. It's all built into the actual unit. I mean, it's astonishing the technology they've got into this, and we've been having great fun running around our building, haven't we? Which is just checking the range, even going through the building. We're getting very good reception, and that ability to be able to just chat freely on a system which is, frankly, this inexpensive is quite remarkable. I believe
let me find it on the website.
You can have up to 8 units now with the new firmware, just chatting to each other.
God, we've got loads of them in stock. Excellent. We've got the whole range. That's great. I mean, that's a sign of how much we've sold. That we're actually stocking the whole range.
And I haven't heard of those. As far as I'm aware, we certainly haven't had any back. So
no,
the quality
they're super
of
happy
the
with
build
them.
seems to be very good. It's also very comfortable, which is really important. I remember with some other makes I've tried in the past with lower budget brands, you know, you'd have that on your ear, you'd really feel it the next day. But with these, they are really quite well designed and very soft
and lightweight. They don't feel
light.
heavy and
Considering it's got all
cumbersome on your
the
head.
electronics in it, you know, the receiver and transmitter as well. You're right. It doesn't feel like much of a weight at all.
And what kind of customers are using them?
We're seeing event people, quite. I think Opera North. I shouldn't really name check individual customers, should I? But you know, I know they bought a set for, you know, obviously coverage in quite a large building. The ability for the crew to be able to chat together is useful. I mean, there's so many uses for these, and actually the uses don't even have to be in the video side, because you can imagine how much fun these would be rather than using a walkie-talkie out and about. A crew of people doing any activity would be able to freely chat to each other over large distances, you know, in any scenario without that need to have a base station somewhere plugged in. So you're free to use them at whatever location you want.
You can use them
the
in
Arctic.
the park or in the Arctic or whatever. Yeah.
Although the batteries probably wouldn't last long in the Arctic.
No, not many do.
No. I'll take that back about the Arctic. Anywhere below between the
maybe
Greenwich
get something more
mean-
specialist for the Arctic.
Just one more thing on that on the C1 is that
cut to yourself.
Of course, cut to me. Yeah.
It's hard to multitask.
Just one more thing on that one. The base station, of course, that you don't have one, but not having a belt pack as well. Because especially when I was using it, when we were testing it out, I do a lot of gimbal work on live streaming, and being able to freely move without getting a cable kind of caught up, it was a big selling point for me. So I really like that, and then also being able to mute and unmute yourself so easily as well. They're quite good. I quite like them.
What sort of situations did you use them in when you borrowed them?
So I took them to my church for the weekend and gave them to our in-house live streaming crew.
So that's live streaming, multi-camera, being able to talk to each other.
Yeah, super useful. We really and one thing I was thinking that they wouldn't be loud enough to hear, because the church that I go to is quite loud.
It's lots of music, right?
Yes, but able to hear everyone quite well, so I was pleasantly surprised.
Excellent. I mean, we've had so many happy customers with those.
Yeah.
So I thought they were well worth a mention. I mean, obviously not the biggest ticket item in video that we released by any stretch of the imagination, but such an interesting little product. And then talking to big ticket items, Blackmagic launched a camera. Not perhaps their most big ticket camera launch. It's essentially the same as their one before it, but they launched the Pocket 6K G2, which combined bits of their Pocket 6K Pro and 6K and unified the lineup a little bit.
A good idea, and it takes the bigger batteries, which I think is the biggest improvement. It takes the MPF style batteries, which last so much longer, because that was always one of the problems we had with the Blackmagic Pocket cameras before they took that style of batteries.
Absolutely. I mean, there are so many nice little tweaks that they put into that. But I would just love to see them shake it up a bit. New form factor. I would love to see a new form factor from Blackmagic. Either go and make a proper pocket camera, like make it go back to the ones that can fit in your pocket, or shape it up a little bit, make it a sort of Komodo or an Affinity style.
I guess there's much less need, much less need for a phone
pocket
that you can fit in your pocket now, because we do have phones which do fit in our pockets with really good cameras. So they're really, I think it's probably sensible that they're going this way. I think if they had made something, it would be quite hard to compete with, Apple and Samsung and
it's the
Google.
Yeah, I mean, who is the target customer for a 2023 actual pocket Blackmagic pocket camera? Because the people who are using pocket cameras are not using it as a pocket camera. It's completely the wrong name for it. They are using it as a low budget cinema camera, essentially. Whereas the pocket one was a bit more, I guess, for cinematic family vacation videos, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah, maybe there isn't a market for that anymore. I mean, let us know, people watching it.
Yeah,
would you buy an £800 pocket cinema camera from Blackmagic again? You know, by pocket, I don't mean the current generation. I mean like the first one they did that you actually can put in your pocket with a tiny little lens on it. Let us know if you would actually be interested in one.
Do you want to have a look at the comments? There's a
Oh yes, I'm way behind, aren't I?
Before they vanish off the screen.
Let's go back. So Peter says his was the Fuji XH2S. Completely agree. I love that camera. We're going to talk about that in a second. Andrea says that he hopes there'll be more focus on audio with new camera releases. I could not agree more with that. We are starting to get that. We're starting to see more and more have the XLR adapters in the mirrorless side of things, having XLR adapters on top. We're starting to see more cameras have 4-channel audio supports, both small mirrorless cameras and video style cameras. What we haven't seen is actually what he put in his next comment, which is 32-bit
floating point. Wouldn't that be fantastic? Absolutely fantastic, built into a camera.
I mean, why not?
Yeah, I mean,
why
if
not?
you can fit it into some of these tiny tentacle sync or
exactly,
you know, why on
can't
earth
you put
could
it in
you
a
not
£7,000 cinema camera?
Yeah, radically better audio.
I would love to see that.
Yep.
And having them do timecode. And Peter completely agrees. 32-bit float would be great to see, and doing timecode. Absolutely. Andrea says, thank you for the ProAV videos. Glad you're finding them helpful. That's what they're here for. That is always great to hear. Thank you very much. Luke agrees. Brilliant. Andreas, what do you think about the Miike Super 35 Cinema Primes? I haven't used them, to be perfectly honest. I'd love to test those. They're just one that has slipped me by a little bit. I've been so busy with other things. They do look good. We've had a lot of interest from some customers on them. It's just ones that I haven't personally taken much of a look at. They do look nice. They do look nice. It's a crowded market now, that small, affordable cinema prime. You know, there's a lot of them. There really is.
And more anamorphic as well.
And budget anamorphic, there's more as well. Peter says the Hollyland Lark 150 is a great dual wireless system. They're making great items for budget-conscious shooters. We'll talk about the Lark, actually, M1 in a minute. That's coming up on the list of releases. However, the Lark 150 was announced the year before, so that one doesn't count. Not up for contention. And Andrea says Blackmagic should make a cube form factor. I definitely agree.
Yeah.
R7, Canon R7 and R10. Did you manage to use either of these?
I haven't, but as someone who's used Canon, you know, SLRs for years and years, I've got I've got an ATD at home. Is the camera, the last camera I actually bought, and didn't just borrow.
Yes.
And you know, I love that form factor, and you know, Super 35 has always been fine for my photography. So I did look at these and think, oh, I've actually got the lenses for those already. And then I remembered they were RF, and I thought, no, I should have sold it when I had the chance. Yeah, that's true.
And the adapter does work beautifully.
Does it work for EFS lenses though?
Yes.
Oh, right.
Maybe EFS lenses on.
Maybe there's hope for me yet, because I do definitely like the look of these.
The R10 in particular, the price point on the R10 is crazy.
It is, isn't it?
Now, it's not a good video tool. I gave it a big hard time in my video on it for basically saying don't use this for professional video, and I stand by that.
Right.
However, if I was buying a camera myself for taking photos at home of the family and friends and all the rest of it, I would buy an R10. That would be the camera I would buy. It's fantastic. It's fantastic to use. It has the same autofocus system as the R3.
Right.
And so, you know, the tracking and the eye tracking is just flawless. It's really easy to use if you're used to those Canon stills cameras, you know, like the ATD that you mentioned.
Yep. I noticed the menus are exactly the same.
It just everything feels familiar. So as a home camera, I really couldn't recommend it more. Or as a simple entry-level pro stills camera, it would do very well, actually. You could absolutely use it as a pro stills camera. For pro video, I disagree with it. The R7, though, on the other hand, is very good. it's still a bit behind the Panasonics and the Sonys of the world in terms of things like codec choices and tools. But that being said, it is, the autofocus is incredible on it. It doesn't have a record time limit. It is a Canon mirrorless / DSLR bot camera that feels just like those ones which we've always used, but has nowhere near any of those limitations anymore.
And the crop factor can actually be an advantage for wildlife shooters, can't it?
Definitely.
That extra punching you get. So
I like the Super 35 crop factor for small portable. Put a 35mm, one of those really lightweight 35mm primes on either of those cameras, and you get a full frame equivalent of a 50mm field of view. Really nice and shallow, and it's tiny. It's really small and lightweight. So for keeping things small and simple, if I was doing, I don't know, travel video or something like that,
perfect.
Where you've got to climb a mountain, great. I'd love cameras like that for that. So yeah, I'm really not. They're certainly not setting the pro video market alight, if you like, with excitement. But I think they're really nice little cameras. Some comments coming in. Talking about Blackmagic, Lucas says they actually made one with no monitor and SDI out a few years ago. Yeah, the sort of micro and cinema box cameras. That's the sort of product I would like to see them take further. They did that one, and it was hampered a bit by its sensor that was inside it, which wasn't a great sensor. But then they did nothing else with it. I'd love to see that. And when does he asks, when do we think Blackmagic are going to update their cinema line? Q3 2023, he says. Oh, that's a long way away.
I have no idea. The thing with Blackmagic is they keep their cards incredibly close to their chest.
Massively so.
Normally, they always used to do major releases, NAB and IBC, but of late that's changed, and the releases come more randomly than that. So I have no idea. They must realise that the Ursas are looking a little long in the tooth now. Even the 12K, the price dropped considerably, didn't it? And we had some interest because actually it's very good at some of the higher frame rates, some of those cropped higher frame rates.
It's one of those cameras that does nothing. There's no cameras on the market that does what that camera does.
At that price point.
At any price point, let alone at that price point.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah.
So I think we will see some new ones, but they'll randomly drop from the sky, and it will turn out they've got a warehouse full of them, because Blackmagic as a company has learnt, I think, not to announce something and then be a year before they deliver it. So the next time when we get an announcement, they'll be in the warehouse or about to drop, and it'll be exciting, because it always is from Blackmagic.
It'll be busy and stressful for me. That's what it'll be. But I really, really hope that comes this year. But who knows? Yeah. To be honest, I think also they've been making so much money on their live production side of things and the ATEM stuff that is where their attention has been, and I don't blame them. I mean, we're going to talk about some of their products actually in a minute. Let's talk about it now. It's basically next anyway. The ATEM SDI. These are great products, fantastic products.
The ATEM SDI. I mean, they obviously had the HDMI version. My favourite being the Extreme ones, and
which is what we're using right now.
We're using an Extreme HDMI here, but adding SDI is just obviously so much more robust. You're not going to trip over it. HDMI, anybody who's worked in the industry just knows how flimsy those connectors are, how easy they are to break internally, how easy they are to yank out,
how prone they are to issues. One day you're just going to turn one of the HDMI cameras on and it's not going to
compatibility the HDMI issues as well. I've had Sony cameras which just won't be detected by a standard ATEM over HDMI. SDI takes all that nonsense out of it, and obviously you can have 100 meters for 3 gig SDI. But what's remarkable about the Extreme ISO version of certainly of the SDI and the HDMI one is the fact you get 9 video recorders. I mean, we're talking something which is under £1,500, and you're getting 9 channels of recording. So, the 8 inputs plus whatever the master output is, and then you can take those files recorded on a USB-C SSD, and you've got a DaVinci project ready-made, and DaVinci, of course, is free. And so you can open the DaVinci project and you can go and put right all the mistakes you made while you were live mixing. This is an astonishing amount of kit. And there are the super source built into the extremes will let you have 4 pictures simultaneously on screen for sort of news-style programs or introducing guests.
So if you cut to ours.
Which is exactly what we're doing. Yeah, we're doing with this program.
With that. There we go. So this is a super source we're looking at now. We've got a white background in there as a source. We've got our 2 cameras as a source and this laptop here as a source as well.
Yeah. And, this is low budget kit. If you've got Photoshop or even Photoshop Elements, you can do live graphics on Photoshop, send them straight to the mixer. And so you've got high quality, brilliant graphics as well. Obviously you haven't got 4K, but for streaming, it has a built-in hardware encoder.
For streaming,
so it streams
I don't want 4K right now. It will come in time once our internet improves and all the rest of it.
But not yet.
Not yet.
There are hardly anybody I know has even tried doing 4K streaming. And in addition to all this, you've got an amazing multi-viewer, which is now so configurable. I know people who've actually bought the Constellation 8K, the really high-end mixer from Blackmagic, and they're using that just as a 4K multi-viewer because nothing else has the feature set for that, certainly for under £10,000. So it is remarkable the amount of kit you're getting on these ISO extremes.
Absolutely.
So I'm huge fan, but SDI has made it for me just so much better. Just the fact you can't pull them out. It's just the whole idea of using HDMI professionally just gives me the heebie-jeebies, to be honest.
Yep, I can see that. I can absolutely see that. What do you think about Andrews' comment here? He says it was a great product for pandemic times, but now demand should go down.
It's interesting. We haven't seen that, have we?
No, not at all.
No, I think the sales have gone from strength to strength. Because a lot of one-man bands have invested in things like PTZ cameras or are doing multiple camera shoots, and it's the perfect low-cost bit of kit for doing streaming from multiple cameras.
And streaming is not going to go away from any corporate company.
Look at the price of diesel. I mean, it's so much better to get your audience remotely, like. This. So we may have had an open day before to do this sort of thing, but people aren't so willing to travel.
And you will catch more people as well. I mean, sure, we've got 30 people watching now. That's small numbers in terms of live streams.
Although every one of you is very important.
Oh, of course, absolutely. But it's small numbers in terms of a live stream audience if you look at Twitch or whatever. But is a very similar amount of people that we might get if we did a physical one here pre-COVID. But the thing about this is that they can be from all over the country, all over the world, and this will sit up there available to watch afterwards and just be able to watch forever.
I don't think it's certainly not just pandemic. It's not a flash in the pan.
Not.
It's these things are going to continue selling very, very well.
Absolutely not. Here we go. Peter says, as a school, we've increased our streaming since the end of COVID. Demand is higher than ever for it. So there we go. Do more streaming now after COVID has eased up than you did during it. Absolutely.
People have lost the fear of it, haven't they?
Yes.
Because there was a terrific fear factor before about bit rates and uplink speeds and everything else, and the simplicity of the ATEM, and it just makes it much easier to do this kind of setup.
Really does make it much easier. Okay, let's go back to our list, because we missed the iFootage anglerfish lights, which I definitely wanted to talk. I do really like these. Now, partly it's because it's from a brand like Ifootage, which I really like. If you haven't used their monopods or their little spider crab arms,
or the slider,
the Shark Slider Nano, any of those sort of products, hopefully you've seen me talking about them on the channel. They just make really nice products. And then they announced some cob lights. Like every single company seems to be doing. Literally, if you make products in there, I'm amazed Canon and Sony don't have their own brand of cob lights. Everyone's doing it. So when we first saw these, we went, okay, more. These are the strangest lighting product I've ever had to review in my career so far, because these are affordable cob lights, much like everyone's making, and yet the quality of the white light that comes out of them, they're daylight only, so they're not bicolor, and they're certainly not RGB. They're daylight only lights. And the reason that they are is because they've fine-tuned that daylight chip so well that this is not an exaggeration. It's scored better on my light meter than the light coming in from the window from outside.
We are in Hemel Hempstead.
We
There's
are in
probably a lot
Hemel
of
Hempstead.
pollution. Might
We're in
knock some of those colour channels down.
in Hemel Hempstead as well. So maybe that's
maybe if we Brecon Beacons or somewhere, we'd have got better result from daylight than the anglerfish. It does make you wonder if you're trying to emulate daylight. Maybe you shouldn't be better than daylight.
Well, maybe. But I think better than daylight could be quite a good tagline for them, couldn't it?
So there could be some vampire, frightening. Yes.
I just find it remarkable that a affordable
one of the lowest costs
is doing that.
Can be that.
I have not measured a light from Arri, Prolight, Light Panels, KinoFlow, any of these massive high-end, well-respected lighting brands that are absolute experts in colour science that has been as colour accurate as these.
Yeah.
Which I just find mind-boggling. But the good news for customers is if you do need a really colour accurate light, say you're doing fashion or beauty or product stuff where you need the colours to be accurate. You know, I use the example of Ferrari red, for example. If you shoot a commercial for Ferrari and the Ferrari red is not Ferrari red, then, you know, you're not going to work for Ferrari again. If you're doing that kind of work, then, yeah, you get some pretty incredibly colour accurate, powerful lights for not very much money at all. So yeah, I really like those lights. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Am I totally insane
agree.
for lighting them so much?
I just think no, you're not. I mean, I've fallen in love with using a couple of these for a shoot because they're just so light, so easy to set up, and they remind me of the very old days of, you know, working with redheads.
Yeah.
And you know, you have to be old to remember there were two types of tungsten light. There were redheads and blondes, and you know, the blondes were the powerful sort of 1,000-watt things, or 2,000-watt. My memory's gone. It was so long ago I used these, but they got so hot you could light a cigarette off them by the end of the day.
Oh yes.
And quite often we did because it was you know, the 1980s. But you know, these things are so light, so easy to handle. You know, cool down so quickly after using them. And a 3-light kit is easy to fit in a small backpack. So they are wonderful.
Absolutely.
And having that accuracy as well. Yeah, whoopee-doo. Anglerfish, where are they going with that? Slightly left field,
well,
isn't
maybe
it?
that
You know.
maybe that's why.
But then again,
they
they've got
taken off
spider
quite so
crabs
much.
and sharks.
They
so
name every single one of their products after a
theme.
Well, yeah, not even nautical. Their tripods are gazelles, for example.
Oh, right.
Lots of them are nautical, though.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're all animals.
Make your mind up, Ifootage. Are you land based or are you?
Their tripods
underwater?
are land based. There was the wild bull tripod, the gazelles.
Wild bull.
I think they're only land based ones that I can think of. But yeah, spider crabs were a weird choice as well. But helps you remember them.
Yeah, I'll say. Yeah.
So yeah, those are the Ifootage lights. Hollyland Lark M1. These are the sort of social media creators' darling, if you like. If you like that, just clip it on your front style of microphone. These ones are brilliant. If you have to hand over to somebody who just doesn't know what they're doing, you know, these are amazing because they just do it all for you, basically.
And a charging case. Anybody?
And a charging case. It's like an AirPod Pro style way of
fantastic.
working. Absolutely.
Can they record as well?
No, they can't record.
Which one am I thinking of then?
The Rhodes can record, but it's a bit of a strange way of recording. I don't really like their implementation of it.
What we need is one of these people to do 32-bit.
I would love that. I think we've seen lots of 32-bit float recorders that live in isolation, like the Zoom F2, or less so the Tentacle Trackie, because that was designed to be part of a timecode system, so it doesn't really live in isolation. But the problem with all of those recorders is monitoring your audio. And you don't have to monitor your audio because you're recording 32-bit float, so levels aren't important. But levels aren't the only thing you're checking when you're monitoring your audio. You're also checking to see if there's an air conditioner hum, if you can hear that hard drive
rustling their clothes an awful lot.
Exactly. The mic's in the wrong place, so when I'm moving my arms, it sounds awful. and you can't check for any of those things because you can't monitor the audio. If they built it into something like that, where it was both sending it back to a receiver to monitor
and recording a high
record
quality
the camera in a lower quality one and recording a high quality as well, I think that would be brilliant.
Yes, hope they're listening.
Hope they're listening. Another quick one to mention is these SWIP batteries. Got some of them down here. They make these in. Let me bring them up on the website. In fact, if I go from the link in the video, they do these in Sony MPF. They do them in Canon BPA for C200, C70, C300 Mark III, BPU for FX6, FX9, and Panasonic VBR for any of their camcorders or the EVA 1. These are fantastic DV batteries. They all communicate and they all charge and via USB-C.
And output via USB-C,
output.
which is incredibly useful for other accessories.
It's useful for accessories, especially audio accessories. Lots of those power over
charging your phone,
USB-C.
let's be honest.
Also helps get you out of a pickle when your laptop dies or your phone dies or whatever. You can charge that. But it's the charging by it, which I just think is brilliant.
Yes.
Because any battery charger for that style of battery is bulky. And so if you travel a lot, not having to take that is always welcome. They do charge faster using one of those than they do over a USB-C port. But if you're just plugging it in to charge overnight while you sleep in the hotel room, it doesn't really matter that much. And, you can very easily, with just a little bundle of cables, be able to charge 10 of these at once.
Yeah.
That'd be a lot of plug sockets for a hotel room with an extension lead. You can charge 10 of them at once.
That's quite a bulky extension lead. Yeah,
maybe several extension
maybe
leads.
reverse back on that one. Yeah.
But
also their new Vlogs have got USB-C,
True.
and in exactly the same way. We found them to be incredibly useful for being able to charge a Vlog via such a tiny charger.
And they make this now, which is their USB-C wall adapter. The picture there's an EU one. I need to get that changed. But each one of those USB ports chucks out 100 watts, which is pretty good for a little USB. I mean, obviously you don't have to use theirs. You can use any from Angle or whoever. But they've got a nice little system now for running Pro batteries off of USB-C, which is brilliant. And this is another real quick one, this Angelbird SE card. If you need a CF Express card, we sell so many of those. We almost barely sell any other CF Express cards anymore, just because that one does it so well.
They do seem to be very good.
Oh, right. How far through the year are we? We've got all the big ticket items left to talk about, so let's speed up a little bit. The Aputure's MT Pro, we've covered their tubes. We've talked about the image tripod till the cows come home. The Rosco DMG light, if you want a robust, it's down there. If you want a robust workhorse small LED RGB light, we fell in love with this thing, didn't we?
It's the build quality. The fact you could club a medium-sized human being to death with one of these. There aren't many other lights you could say
just
that about.
Just because you could doesn't mean you should.
Very true. If you're listening, yes, don't necessarily use it for that. But you'll be able to see what you're doing at the same time, which is a huge advantage in a club. But no, it's the quality. It's the build quality, the tools, the app, everything about it screams quality, which is wonderful. Everything except the setting I've got it on at the moment, which is disco. I believe. But really, high quality bit of kit, which, I love.
And high quality light output as well. It's Rosco, so, you can trust it.
A lovely, lovely kit.
That brings us on to the first sort of big ticket. Well, not first. We had some cameras earlier on in the year, but one of the first of a series of big ticket mirrorless launches. Fujifilm really upped the game with the XH2S and H2. I don't think you've used these much, have you?
No, not at all.
Did you manage to use them much when they were here, Nathaniel? No.
Just you then.
Just me then. So I'm on my own
You're
here.
on your own, yeah.
I love them. I really think they are brilliant. It's another one of these things that a bit of a unique selling point. Nobody else is doing it quite like they are with their sensor readout. the dynamic range off of their super 35mm sensor in there, their rolling shutter off of it. It's all at a standard that you'd expect from a C300 or
Right, that's
above.
interesting.
Even
won
up to
several
Aries.
awards. I've seen them win on other channels who've done sort of camera of the year.
I'm sure.
I've seen it crop up quite a lot.
They are fantastic. It mystifies me as to why they're not used more widely in the pro video world, because they're really capable tools. They really are.
What about autofocus in comparison to
Well,
Canons and Sonys?
They do have phase detect autofocus. They have a hybrid autofocus system. It's not quite for video what Canon and Sony's is, but it's not far off. It's certainly better than Panasonic's contrast-based, and it's certainly better than what Blackmagic have and all the rest of it, and Red Komodo and that kind of camera with the medium
The
quality,
occasional autofocus.
occasional use autofocus. Yeah. I think it is more in the category of you can use it all the time autofocus like Canon and Sony, but it's just maybe not quite as good as those. But I think it's certainly not enough of a step backwards to mean that it's that big a compromise on choosing them versus anyone else. And the lens lineup is brilliant. The amount of quality lenses that they have in their lineup that are not that much money and really small and lightweight. It's a bit like the argument for buying Micro Four Thirds, but this is Super 35 or APS-C, and yeah, I really rate them. I really
take
rate
it home
them.
over Christmas and see
I
if
think
I
you really
become a
should.
convert.
I think you really should. They're nice cameras, and they've now got the XT5 as well. And so the slight differences between them: the XH2S is the very video orientated one. The XH2 is the more stills focused ones, and those two are the flagship. And then you've got the XT5 that is effectively like a slightly watered down XH2.
Right.
With slightly less capable on the video side of things. So
Are they ProRes too?
they do, yeah. They're them and the GH6 are sort of the only ones that do ProRes inside them, and 5.6K, or even 6K. They really are very, very capable, and with the dynamic range and rolling shutter that you would expect, nearly Alexa quality to be kicking out. Like they are really, really very good. Andreas says the Fujis are not used that much in industry because the Fuji doesn't have a cinema camera in their lineup, which means you can't use them for a B camera. Completely agree with that. This is a camera that is going to appeal to a serious video user, and it's not going to be their A camera. So, where's its FX6? Where's their C300 or C70? I think that does hold them back a little bit. I would love to see. How amazing would that be if Fuji came out and started to enter the cinema camera market?
It would be interesting.
It would be interesting. That would certainly shake things up a little bit. But yeah, I'm not surprised people are giving it awards because I think it's fantastic. Let's move on. Should we talk about the Yolobox Pro quickly and the Yolobox Mini?
Pro and the Mini? These are interesting streaming boxes, which I think Nathaniel's probably best to talk about these in detail because he's been using these and actually using them in real life. I've been impressed with their simplicity and their reliability. The sort of these lower end streaming bits of kit, they can be unreliable. So getting something which brings together so many features at such a good price point seems to be quite unique. And the only problem I had initially with one is finding a charger. They seem to be quite fussy about the USB-C charger you work with. But as soon as you find something, and in fact they've got some recommendations, then it's perfect. It has a long built-in battery which will last a long time. Just the fact it's a sort of all-in-one complete streaming unit which even lets you use graphics and a sort of sophisticated graphics, and you can record internally, add a card. But as I say, probably Nathaniel's the best person to talk about these because he's used them in real life, in real streaming circumstances.
What do you think, Nathaniel?
I've really, really enjoyed using them. Really how Simply, they've made things. They've kind of combined things into one unit. Not having to bring my ATEM and a screen and run cables. I've really enjoyed using them with wireless transmitters, and then dotting cameras around the room, and then just being around the wide camera and just tap in to switch the cameras live.
So what's the difference between the Pro and the Mini? It's number of inputs, isn't it?
Yeah. So the Pro has more inputs, and the Mini, I don't know if you could pull it up for us, Carl, but the Mini has one on there. But I've just really, especially with Yolobox, what I really enjoy is how much they are updating. They're always sending updates to the Yolobox. Even today, when I was setting up for the live stream today, there was a new update on there. So I really love how supportive they are as well. And they really do listen to people when they make requests as well. So pretty good.
And they're putting really sensible features in them. You know, a stream starting counter, being able to pull YouTube comments in, just built into the device. That's really useful stuff for their customers, which a lot of other companies aren't really doing.
I believe they've got another model which is for Instagram, which is portrait streaming, which is quite interesting.
No, they're an interesting brand, Yolobox. Definitely one to watch. And let's move on to which I'm sure is going to be your main one that you want to talk about, Richard.
I'm going to take a big sip of water here.
I'm going to pass over to you and sit back for a little bit.
Yeah. I was actually, this is true story. This is definitely a true story. I was trying to build a full frame PTZ. I was using a data video PTZ head, and I was using a BS1H from Panasonic, which is a lovely full frame box camera with some beautiful looking images. And I was trying to build a rig, so I was using a follow focus unit to, control the zoom, not the focus, so I could remotely zoom the box camera lens. And it was an interesting project. It was frustrating because effectively you needed about 3 different interfaces to make the thing work. You'd have the data video interface to make the thing point, and it did at least control the motors, the zoom motor, but there was one box to do that. You had to tighten up all the screws beforehand. There was a little bit of shimming as it moved around, as it would always be with a bit of a Frankenstein's monster of a camera setup. But the pictures looked great, and I was thinking, yeah, this is good, but I don't think I'll do a video because this is going to be a nightmare to support.
What was it about a full frame PTZ that intrigued you? Why did you think it would make sense in the industry? Because
full frame is rather beautiful, isn't it? It does. You were trying to convince me of this for years when I was such an advocate for Micro Four Thirds, and that creamy, the shallow depth of field, the low light ability of full frame is something which isn't really known in the PTZ world, and so that's why I was trying to do it, because I wanted the beautiful pictures that I knew I could get out of our full frame cameras, but I wanted it with the convenience and the remote control possibilities of a PTZ. So I wanted the best of both worlds. Yep. And literally the week after I'd given up with my full frame PTZ Frankenstein's monster camera, Sony just almost randomly sent us the FR7. And it was just love at first sight, because it was everything I'd been trying to do, but with one really wonderful interface. And the icing on the cake, of course, is that it records too, because PTZ cameras traditionally don't record. A lot of the Panasonics can record onto micro SD, a sort of low quality H.264 stream, proxy file style thing. But not just in general, but I'd say none of them record in good quality. And all of a sudden, the FR7 doesn't just record 4K; it can record 4K at 120 frames a second. It is an FX6 as a PTZ, and I think Sony could have brought this out and said, "Oh, it's 20 grand."
Well, this is the thing. A lot of the people talking about this online have said, "But the price, price. It costs like £4 grand more than 3 grand more than an FX6." how can they justify that price?
But you see,
Sitting over
most
here thinking, hang on.
a lot of PTZ cameras are based on a camcorder. The Sony UE150, which is a fantastic broadcast spec PTZ with 12 gig output, is based on the CRX350 camcorder.
Yep.
So it's the same lens, sensor, and block. And that's a $3,000 camera in a $9,000 PTZ. So the fact this is a $6,000 camera in an $8,000 PTZ is actually a bargain.
It really is.
And they've let it record. They've still left all those features. And what we have is the amazing autofocus, which this brings. Again, so useful when you've got a remote control camera. You're not having to worry about focus. You can literally pull focus by tapping people's faces on an iPad app connected to it. I was astonished. It was like a white Christmas of a product. Been waiting for years. Didn't really know how much I'd enjoy one, but when it happened, it was amazing. It is my favourite thing of the year, I have to say. I've not been a fan of Sony, I have to say. I didn't particularly like their colour science on previous generations of cameras. Their PTZs look a bit, or their other PTZs, compared with the latest crop from Panasonic and Canon, have looked a bit dated. And suddenly, wham bam, this comes along, and it was love at first sight. Very, very impressive camera.
Interesting comment from Phil. He says the Sony FR7 should have had the FX9 sensor so that you would have been able to shoot 4K in Super 35.
That's actually a really, really good idea, because one of the limitations, or one of the main limitations with this camera, and I hate to, it's the love of my life. I hate to find anything bad to say about it, but one of the limitations is the lenses, those power zoom lenses. And if you did let it have a crop mode, we could double the focal length, which would make it a lot more useful in sport. Because at the moment, the longest length of power zoom lens is the 28 to 135, which is something like a 5x zoom, which
it would also be much more useful in theatre and
yes, for shooting
live
at the back.
events.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's a good point. But then again, it would probably cost more.
It would definitely cost more.
So the fact it is this price point, and the fact they've left in all these recording options, and it does seem to be incredibly well integrated. When you use the app for it, it's well thought out. It doesn't feel clunky. It's nothing like my Frankenstein's monster. It feels like an integrated camera, if you use those power zoom lenses, and that is where you're limited. So there's just 3 at the moment. There's the the 16 to...
Well, there's this one.
Yeah.
So the 16 to 35
16
f4.
to 35.
And then there's the
about
bigger, more
£1,000.
expensive f2.8 version, which is also 16 to 35.
Yep.
And then there's the 28 to 135 f4.
F4. And F4, you see, F4 for me in terms of... my old Micro Four Thirds days always seemed a little bit on the tight side. I was thinking, why isn't it 2.8? But of course, F4 full frame is capable of very shallow depth of field. So actually, I've been very impressed with the sort of shallow depth of field effects you can get with that 28 to 135. Yes. And at least it's a constant F4, so you don't have that problem of ramping. Every other PTZ camera I know ramps. So as you zoom in, the iris is closing down because they're using lower quality optics and lower quality and smaller sensors. And as it closes down, of course, we're cutting out the amount of light that can hit that smaller sensor. So if you're zooming in to 24, 30 times on cameras like that from the back of the hall, they're letting in quarter of the light they were when they were wide open. So their low light performance takes a dive. And of course, with full frame, it's amazing in low light, and that sort of high base ISO, this thing is a low light monster. And B, you've got that ability that it's a constant zoom lens, so it's not closing down as you move in. And I nearly forgot, it's got their amazing variable neutral density filter.
Yep, absolutely.
So you can lock off your shutter speed, you can lock off your gain so it doesn't ramp up the gain, and just use the exposure control of that variable neutral density. It gives you so much more control using a camera in situations where you might be reacting to what's happening about.
I mean, this is all stuff that we know and we love from the FX6 and other cameras similar to it, of course, but it must feel so... I mean, I'm not in that PTZ world and, that's not the background I come from, but I imagine it must feel so nice as a PTZ user and PTZ customer to have access to those
I was talking to
industry leading.
I was talking to some broadcasters who regularly do fixed rig stuff.
Yeah.
And they were asking about rigging other cameras with a PTZ head to make a full frame PTZ. And I talked to them about, I said, don't even bother, go for the FR7. And they said, oh, it's too expensive, and eventually, after drilling down into it, it wasn't that it was too expensive. What would happen is the client would see how good those pictures were and want them to change all of their PTZ cameras so that they were all FR7s. And admittedly, it might not work in every situation, but it was that sort of game changer. And I know somebody else who works for a production company. We were talking about what is the advantage of using this over using traditional PTZs, and it really is. You can make Love Island look like made in Chelsea. It's that ability to get that shallow cinematic look on what is a fixed rig or a PTZ.
Andreas has left an interesting comment about that idea that Phil had of using the FX9 sensor inside it. He points out about cooling systems needing a bigger size. Of course, the sensor that's in the FX6 is the sensor that was developed for the A7S Mark III, and so it's designed to be a low heat output sensor to use inside a small mirrorless camera body. And then they put it into a bigger camera with the FX6. The FX9 is not that. The FX9 is the size the FX9 is because it has some cooling and all the rest of it. That is a sensor that needs to be cooled, I imagine. I don't think they would be able to put that sensor inside a smaller body. It
would definitely be an interesting option. I mean, I wondered about a FX30 based cheaper
one
version, but with a Super 35 sensor.
That'd be fantastic.
As an alternative. Now they know how to build that form factor. Why not give us a range of them? But that's being a bit disingenuous, because I still am in love with the FR7, and it is. Just as a complete package, the fact it records, the fact the autofocus is amazing, the variable neutral density, the fact it's got reference input, so you can gen lock it. This is a very complete camera, but it's not good for everything. You could not cover a football pitch that sort of focal lengths you can with B4 lenses.
It's not going to replace a traditional camera operator either.
No, exactly.
Especially something like sports. The amount of skill involved in tracking people in sports, a PTZ is not going to be able to.
Where I see this as being key is small studio setups, because the image quality you can get in that sort of small studio setup. And in fact, we tried it last week with a prompter, a new thing from Data Video called the TP900.
Yeah.
And it's quite hard because it's a chunky monkey, let's be honest. It's just like me, because it's a large body and there's a lot of movement on the lens. Our hearts were in our mouths when we set it up with the TP900, because the last thing you want is the lens crunching into the reflective glass, the half mirrored glass of a prompter, because you know exactly what will happen then. It will be a nasty noise and heartbreaking moment when you realise you have to pick up all the bits of broken glass. But because the TP900 has been designed just for PTZs, we found we could fit it in quite easily and get the full range of movement and get, basically it mounts the camera upside down in the unit. So rather than having the base of the camera dictate how far the lens is, you can get the lens much closer to the glass.
Gotcha.
Which means we've got a much wider field we can play with. So using it in a small studio setup, I think one of the problems before was not being able to get it behind a prompter. But now with that prompter, which is about £1,600, we've got this combination, which means we've got a unique sort of small studio setup. So maybe we should shoot this on it, because then I could be operating it as we talk.
Yeah, you absolutely could. It'd be perfect for this sort of situation.
Yeah.
Do you think we should call the guys and ask for 4 FR7s?
Yeah, I think we should. I'll call Kev
now.
3.
We've got one behind you.
Just take it home over Christmas.
Right.
So yes.
Staying in the PTZ world, just after the FR7 was announced, like a week after, Canon launched their flagship PTZ that is
a CRN 700.
Normal one.
Yeah.
It is not a FR7.
In a normal year.
Normal PTZ.
And what was so impressive about the CRN 700 was really the fact that it's had better picture quality than not just the CRN 500, but the UE 150 from Panasonic.
Yeah.
So it has 12 gig SDI output, and it has a ability to output a cropped output at the same time. So it can effectively be two cameras in one. You can get the wide picture and then a secondary picture which you can crop within it, which the UE 150 from Panasonic does as well. But the 12 gig SDI gives you the ability to have that real-time, 4K 50, 60 frames a second output from it. But it was a leap in picture quality got me. It was just better. The low light was better than anything else on the market, apart from the FR7. It's got a 15 times zoom range, really useful zoom range. And actually, I believe it's based on the sensor and the lens block from my favourite camcorder, the 405. The
605.
Sorry, 605. Yeah, I'm thinking of
No,
Peugeot's.
500, I think, is the 405.
Yeah, the 500 is the 405. Yeah, the 700 is the 605, Panasonic 605, and which is a great quality high dynamic range camcorder. So I do like the look of the images out of that. It looks exceptionally good. It beats the Panasonic UE 150. However, Panasonic have announced the UE 160 yet. I just haven't seen one, and the UE 160 will be. I'm leapfrogging again in quality. I haven't seen the image out of it, but it's got a ability to output high frame rate through SDI. So live high frame rate through SDI. I believe it's 120 frames a second, but that will be in HD, not in 4K. But it's a live output, very different to the recorded output.
Interesting.
So the Panasonic, I'm looking forward to seeing that image quality. I'm guessing it might be on par with the CRN 700. However, the CRN 700 will be significantly cheaper, but without that feature. The Panasonic has also got something called SMPTE 2084. It's like a sort of NDI for the broadcast world, a very low latency video over IP channel, which is only in HD, but is kind of the workflow of the future in the broadcast domain. So that's unique. That and the 4K, and the HD 120 frame live output do make the Panasonic very interesting. But for everybody else, that CRN 700, the upgrade in image quality is going to give you lovely, lovely pictures in every scenario.
I mean, the N500 was already one of the nicest looking PTZs on the market. To up that with the N700, which
I felt terrible
better.
about being unfaithful to the 500 with the FR7. I'm endlessly guilty about that. I've lost sleep. Because it's been bitter breakup with the 500, but luckily the 700's come along to.
It keeps turning away from you when you walk into the showroom.
It does. It won't look at me. That's how it knows.
And then we had, I think, the only camcorder that was launched last year, the Panasonic X2E. Yeah. Which not only was it the only camcorder, it's also incredibly similar to the CX350. Which just essentially one of those, but without all eye codecs.
Yes,
it's effectively all it is.
It's the same thing, which means it's the same as UE 150 as well in terms of optics and sensor, which is quite interesting. So it will match that camera beautifully. It is good. It's good in every way. I think the viewfinder's been upgraded, hasn't it?
Yeah, and the screen's been upgraded. There's some nice things. Yeah. It's a smaller body, things like that.
And good price point.
It's a nice camcorder.
Yeah.
It's not going to revolutionise the industry, but it's a nice camcorder.
Yeah, for the money, excellent piece of kit.
Then Sony launched the FX30, which is a bit more in the line of might revolutionise the industry. I mean, that is probably a bit far, but we've seen this surge in interest in Super 35 cameras.
Do you think it's because of the Alexa?
Well,
no, they must have been developing it way before that.
They've been developing that Alexa for a very long time, and Sony have been developing this for a long time. I think it is interesting that so much has happened at once. If anything, Canon sort of...
Yeah, you're right. The C70,
they stuck with it with the C70 and the C300 when everyone else was moving full frame. And there is a lot to be said for Super 35. And if you compare the FX30 to the FX3, that small little form factor of it as a small video cinema camera, I think it makes more sense almost in Super 35 than it does in full frame, which hurts me a little bit because I love the image quality out of the FX3. But the lenses that this gives you access to, like the 18 to 110 power zoom f4, the simple stills lens that came as a kit lens with the FS5, not an exciting lens, but a really practical lens, and it's really not that much money, and it's very, very light. And so, you know, for a simple corporate shooting, modern video company,
Yeah.
you know, having a few of those, they are tiny little runaround cinema cameras.
And of course, it is capable of 4K at 120 frames a second,
is,
which is
and
becoming a norm. Which you can imagine, how it was science fiction a couple of years ago to be having a low-cost camera doing 4K at 120
Absolutely,
frames.
it was. Absolutely, it was. I mean, that was stuff that you didn't even get up on the flat. You had to go to Reds and things like that to get that kind of frame rates. And now we're getting a camera that costs, I mean, how much are they actually going for now?
1,700 plus that, aren't they?
Yeah.
So they're in the ballpark with the GH6.
Yeah.
You know, they're that sort of price point.
Yeah, massively so. I mean, this is a really entry-level price point for a camera that is this capable. And where am I going?
Do you think it will hurt sales of the Blackmagic Pocket cameras?
Yes. I think those Blackmagic Pocket cameras are fantastic, and the image quality that you get out of those, I think, is still
Bang
much more
per buck.
cinematic than this. And they have that fantastic RAW format, Blackmagic RAW. I really don't think this replaces the Pocket cameras, but I think there are a lot of people that ended up with a Pocket camera that perhaps needed a more convenient camera.
Yeah.
And this is absolutely that convenient camera. And the image quality out of this is surprisingly good. It's not as good as the FX3 and the A7S Mark III. But if you compare it to other Super 35 cameras, like I did some comparisons to this and the FS7. You know, the FS7 that dominated the broadcast industry for years and years and years. It was the absolute workhorse, and most of what we saw large sensor single camera TV was shot on that for broadcast TV, but not narrative TV. This way outperforms it. And you know, I think it's a really interesting camera. I think it's really interesting.
No EVF, of course, which
it's certainly not perfect.
Again, my long-sightedness, it does make
Absolutely.
it harder to use. Although for once you could trust the autofocus.
You can really trust the autofocus. It really is very good at the autofocus. And as Andreas says here, he prefers Super 35 over full frame in most projects. To get a sharper background can be a good thing, especially in documentary projects. Yes, there's that. But I find it doesn't necessarily help you get a sharper background, but you get more of a sense of where you are than you do in full frame. And both are good, but Super 35 helps you walk the line a little bit between those two looks. You can have a more detail in the background when you want it easier. And you can chuck it out of focus still, because it's still quite a large sensor. So I mean, nobody needs selling on how good Super 35 is. Cinema's been shot on it for the last
long time. Yeah,
30 years.
We all got a bit carried away with full frame, but maybe
and full frame's lovely. It's got its place, but it's not replacing Super 35. It's a new lovely thing in addition to Super 35. Right, let's rattle through some of these because we're running out of time, and we're nearly caught up. Sony had the new vlogging camera. We won't talk about that too much. I want to talk about the Accsoon SeeMo. It's a tiny little product, and this is something that I think people have been waiting for such a long time, because we all carry one of these in our pockets, and being able to clip it in like that.
Luckily, we haven't all got a picture of your wife on it.
No, luckily not. And being able to use... I mean, they are such good screens.
They are. Yeah.
iPhones have got much better screens in them.
And they spoil us for, they're OLED for a start, aren't they?
Exactly.
So...
You'd pay a lot of money to get a 5-inch screen that looked that good.
Yeah. And the fact you can now use it with an HDMI input,
Yes.
and it has some other abilities. The fact you can stream too from an HDMI source straight into your phone is a wonderful little app with decent tools. No, it's hardly a stocking filler. What are they in terms of cost?
Let's have a look.
Let's have a
139 ex-VAT.
Well, it is, rich person's stocking
A
filler.
rich person's stocking filler. They are. I mean, we've been wanting to use a phone as a monitor.
And now we can.
And now we can. It is as simple as that. And not only does it let you do it, it's actually quite a good implementation of it as well.
Yes,
with
it decent makes tools. Sense. Yeah, absolutely. It's only HD, of course, but you can still punch in. You can still check focus on it. I've been really impressed, and now I've got an iPhone where the battery will actually last, 8 or 9 hours. I'd be quite happy to use it for that sort of thing. Very impressive. And you can use it with an iPad as well, can't you?
Yeah, and they're coming out with an iPad clamp as well. I mean. So the actual device itself is this bit. This is just an iPhone and
it's a
clamp.
phone holder. Yeah.
So bit of Velcro on that. Stick that on the back of your iPad.
Suddenly, at that
done.
size, it doesn't seem such good value for money, does it?
No, that's a lot.
And that's got a battery on.
It's a very compact. Yeah,
it's MPF batteries.
MPF batteries.
Yeah.
Yep. MPF batteries, and that's the only way to power it, really. But yeah. I just think it's
great
a
technology.
Really nifty little product.
Or you can get that Sony phone which has an HDMI in.
Sure. There's also that.
I also quickly, just one more thing on that. I quite like how you can record to it as well. So I quite like the feature of just plugging my camera in, quick little social media videos, recording to the camera roll, uploading to Instagram, wherever you're uploading. I think is really, really a nifty feature that they got there as well.
It saves so much time, doesn't it?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
So much time. We then had basically a week that was a battle of the mirrorless cameras. We had both the Sony A7R Mark V and the R6 Mark II turning up at essentially the same time, keeping me busy. Very similar cameras in some ways, very different cameras in other ways. They are both more stills cameras than they are video cameras, but they are also both very capable video cameras. If you want a hybrid video camera and you can't stretch the price point of a Sony A1
or an
R5C or even an R5, these are your choices, really. I mean, these are both very, very capable. The two things that stand out from either camera that I think of every time I look at them is one on Canon. It was so uncharacteristic of Canon to put a tool like false color inside one of their mirrorless cameras, and I nearly fell off my chair when they set that in the pre-disclosure. It's a tiny thing, and I'm sure most people and customers out there wouldn't be anywhere near as interested in it as I am, but
I must admit, with false colour, I always feel like I'm on an acid flashback, so I do avoid it.
It takes some getting used to, but it is, I think, the most useful exposure tool out there. I use it all the time, and by using it all the time, I don't mean I operate the camera with it enabled. Obviously not, because that is like an acid flashback. For just quickly toggling on and off with an assignable button to be able to see where your skin tones are, whether your white background is clipped. Take the shot of, if we cut to Richard, being able to isolate your skin tone from that white background behind you and check that white background hasn't clipped is so unbelievably useful.
If you don't have any zebras,
Well, no, it's so much better than zebras. So much better than zebras. I find zebras a real pain to use. And waveforms.
It's too many colours for me to remember. It's too much information.
It's all right, Richard. One day I'll teach you how to use it.
Thank you. Please do. I look forward to it.
But putting that in a mirrorless camera was such a big step forwards, I think, for mirrorless cameras as a whole. We've seen Panasonic put waveforms in. We've seen Sony add in various different exposure tools. But having Canon adding that was one, very uncharacteristic for Canon, but two, I think a really big step forward for mirrorless cameras, because I really like false color. And then on the Sony side of things, with the A7R Mark V, they're the first camera manufacturer that I'm aware of to put a dedicated AI chip, which, if you're not already interested in that camera, you might have missed. But that is huge for our industry. Like, if anything from 2022, I think is going to genuinely change the industry, and in 10 years' time, we're going to think...
Aren't you worried that the camera will be cleverer than you?
Yes, but isn't that just AI in general?
Yeah, well, exactly.
Have you paid any attention to AI? It's scary. But this is the start of it coming into our industry.
Are you sure you want to take that shot, Carl?
Pan a little bit to the left. Really? Now, let's caveat that a little bit as me being a bit hyperbolic and excited. It doesn't do anything that cameras aren't already doing. You know, cameras are already using AI. Anything that has face detect, eye tracking, any of that kind of stuff, it's all built upon AI. AI is in pretty much every camera nowadays because of the how much autofocus is there. Even back to automatic white balance and you know, auto exposure tools and AV and TV and in stills cameras. You know, all of this stuff wasn't necessarily built on AI, but have used AI over the years in order to train it to be better and to train automatic white balance to not get tricked by snow and that kind of stuff. So AI has been used, but this is the first time we've seen a dedicated processing unit inside a camera that is just for AI processing, because it's such an important part of what the camera is doing. And that, I think, is really going to change things going forwards. We're going to see so much more of that be used in all of our cameras at every single level of the industry. And I think in 10 years' time, every camera's going to have a chip like that in it, and it's going to be really widely used. I think that's going to go down in history as a bit of a turning point, I think, for us. Right. The Prolight Orion 675, niche product. It's a very high-end light. I'm just going to scroll back through the comments because I saw Andreas. Here we go. I think the Prolight 675 FS is the most exciting product release in lighting of 2022. I hope my local rental house will buy some of these. If you want your local rental house to buy some, tell your local rental house that you want them to buy some, because whenever we talk to rental companies are buying quite a lot of these actually, so this is taking off in rental. But whenever we talk to rental companies about new exciting products, that is always the response is, yep, we love it, we're going to invest in it once we can see that there's the demand there, that we will make our money back on it. It is a
classy light, isn't it? Let's be honest. It is.
It's brilliant. I think as a high-end RGB hard source light, it is the best on the market right now. And I think they're a really exciting company. I think their partnership with Dado Lights is it really elevates them up to a new level of trust, which they need to have in order to be able to compete with the likes of Light Panels and Arri. I think it's a really, really interesting brand. I think it's a really interesting product and light engine, both from the big picture stuff like the light engine itself and the RGB ACL, but there's other brands doing that now, but they were sort of one of the first to do it, down to the small things like the positive lock system on the Bowens mounts. You've played with that in there.
Absolutely love it.
It makes such a difference.
It does. You can just feel the quality. It's really quite something.
You lock a Bowens mount, softbox or something on the front, and now all of a sudden it doesn't rattle anymore.
Very good idea.
It really is brilliant. But we're running out of time, so let's move on. Sorry, Prolight. Swift announced this tiny little tripod, which is a tiny tripod. You know, it makes a lot of sense. We've actually taken this to a couple of our really big customers that compared a lot of small travel tripods to one another at the same time, and the Swit was the one they picked, which is why I ended up doing a video for it on the channel. Well, Nathaniel ended up doing a video for it on the channel. But it's a nice product. Nathaniel, what did you think when using it?
I really liked it. Yeah, I think two things that stuck out to me was that it has an underslung mode where you can invert the kind of column, and I thought that was quite unique because then you can really pan from low angles and then quickly change it as well. And I also liked how it felt really well built. Other tripods at that price point don't feel as robust as that one does. For me, that the handles, the dials, the clips, all kind of felt really well made. So that was something that stuck out to me.
Brilliant.
So the last, I mean, we won't talk about the C70's new firmware update, you know, and the Vaxis. Neither of those are new products for 2022. But the Samyang V8F Primes was, and actually surprised me. It's worth pointing out how many views that video got. There's clearly some interest in those lenses. These are another sort of new product category of a cinema lens. I use inverted commas there,
but with autofocus.
With autofocus. Have you caught up with these?
I have. I watched the video.
What do you think?
To be absolutely honest, I thought the quality of them looked exceptionally good for the price point, and
exactly.
And the fact the set matches, and as I've become a recent discoverer of the automatic way of focusing, and begun to like it very much.
They will work on an FR7 if that's what you mean.
Yeah, exactly. So no, I'm really been impressed with them, and certainly the images look lovely from them. So yeah,
absolutely.
Thumbs up.
Nathaniel, did you get a chance to? I'm curious to get your thoughts on them actually, because you own how many Sony cameras do you own now? You own an FX6, right? Is it just that one?
Yeah, just that one.
That one. But I mean, these are, you know, the perfect little cinema lenses for that in many ways, because you want to be using the autofocus in a camera like that. Don't know, do they appeal to you, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, definitely. I'm really interested by them, and I'm eager to try them actually, just because of the size as well. Not especially if we're trying to put camera on a gimbal, and the FX6 is quite big anyway in comparison to other cameras. So where possible, it's good to have lenses that aren't as heavy as well. But I was really impressed by the picture quality as well that were on the test that we did. So yeah, I definitely want to give them a try for sure.
Cool. Right, shall we wrap up a little bit?
Couple of comments. Do you want to?
A couple of comments. Kevin says, do we think Sony will see a replacement for the Z280 in 2023? I would love to see a new camcorder from Sony.
Yes.
What do you think?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I would
Surely they will.
buy the 605.
Well, there's that. But I mean, Sony users are Sony users, and so it's
You're right.
important
No,
for-
the 280 looked like a very well-featured camera, but
The
I think
280
they've been stuck on more. The camcorders have been short on components.
Yeah, there's that.
More than the other cameras. So maybe that might delay something like that. But no idea, I'm afraid.
Matt then says, my favourite product of this year was the Sony FX30 because I have a set of the
those
Fujinon
Fujinon
MK
They are
lenses,
rather
which
lovely.
are beautiful, and they're so lightweight as well.
Yeah.
He says a match made in heaven, so I don't blame you for picking the FX30. Shall we move on to that way? And now, give me a bit of thinking time. Do you want to talk about the FR7 a bit more? Shall we pick our favourite
take it home
products
over
of
Christmas
2022?
and introduce it to my family and say, this is your new stepmom.
I mean, I'm assuming it's your favourite product of 2022.
It is. That sort of melding of, one of the best sub-10 gate cinema cameras and one of the latest and greatest with PTZ. What is there not to love? So
Absolutely.
Yes.
I'm finding it really hard to pick one. Have you got one, Nathaniel? Give me more thinking time.
Yeah, well, I have a really bad habit of buying things that I review. As I was reviewing more gear, I was thinking, okay, I need to kind of stop now. But one of the things that I have bought this year is the Accsoon SeeMo, and I really do like it. I've used it so much since I've purchased it. I've used it to, on my pocket camera, because I have a Blackmagic Pocket, I often, if I'm filming myself, I'll put it on the top of the camera. So it's great if your camera doesn't have an articulating screen. And then, just being able to record quickly and send stuff to social media and use my phone as well for a monitor, because it's always in my bag. It's not going to replace a dedicated monitor like the ATEM Ninja 5 or anything like that, but just having it in the bag and being able to pick it up and use it has been really great for me. So for me, the Accsoon SeeMo is my product of the year.
So come on, Carl.
I've got to pick one. I mean, I might pick the Aperture. I'm split between the tubes and the flexible panels. Can I jumble those?
You can have both on your desert island. You can have a very well lit desert island.
I just think though are long overdue. I think having that Sidus-Link technology, even if you're not using it to control all of your lights, having it for things like background tubes and in practical lights. And hiding lights up in inaccessible areas like you do with flexible lights, I think that is one of the best control systems on the market, and a brand with the popularity and the product design that Aperture and Amaran have, finally coming out with products that work with that perfectly. You know, they've always had it on their cob lights and that sort of stuff, and it's fine there. It's nice there. It was a big selling point of those features, but to me, it's lights like this where it really, really sings, and you know, I think it was only a matter of time before they came along and sort of dominated that market. I'm talking the mid to lower end of the tubes and flex panels market. You know, if you get the bigger ones that are going to be lining the steps in Strictly Come Dancing and all that sort of stuff, you're still going to be using Astero and Quasar Science and brands like that. But for the simple lighting camera operator, for the YouTuber at home, you know, for a small corporate studio, I think these are really exciting. Let's just see what people are saying in the chat.
Excellent diplomatic choice there.
Alminox says his favourite is the Great Joy 35mm anamorphic lens with a constant squeeze ratio. That's one I need to play with. It's been on my list to play with for a long time. Luca just says, happy holidays, everyone. Stay safe. Thank you, Luca. Thanks for watching. And Matt says, honourable mention is the new Rodecaster Pro 2 as a sound guy for 5 decades. What that product can do, what my whole rack would require years ago. Oh, Nathaniel, you're using one right now. Oh, I'll clear the comment so you can see. There we go. It's there. What do you think?
I've been really enjoying using it. We actually have a review coming out on it in the new year.
Oh, careful. You haven't started properly making it yet. Don't commit to something you haven't started.
I'm really enjoying it. I think there's been enough upgrades from the previous one to make it make sense if you're a version 1 owner. Yeah, it is very colourful and makes things really easy. Not perfect in every scenario. With a lot of the live streaming that I do, if I'm ever using PA systems and big setups like that, then not perfect for that because there's not as many ins and outs. But in this scenario where we're using it today, in podcasting, in small setups, I think it's really, really good.
Excellent.
Peter says, thanks for a great show. Have a great Christmas. Phil says the Forza LED lights, the 720Bs, absolutely. Nanlite make incredible products. Alminox says, here's hoping we'll see some cameras with 32-bit float audio next year for the sound guys. For everyone. For not just for the sound guys. For everyone. Merry Christmas, everyone, says Phil. And that's where we'll leave it. Merry Christmas, everyone. So thank you so much for your time, giving up pretty much a whole afternoon for this, Richard. I appreciate it.
I've enjoyed it. It's always good to have a natter.
And thanks, Nathaniel, for multitasking your way through the stream. That's the first time you've had to do that, right?
Yeah, it's been fun.
I have tried to do that, and it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard. So well done, mate. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Merry Christmas, everyone. Thank you to everyone who's bought from ProAV in 2022. And bring on 2023. We'll see you all next year.
Meet Swit's latest RGBW panel innovations, the Van Gogh 70 and Van Gogh 100 LED panels. The Van Gogh series uses exclusive edge-mounted RGBW SMD LEDs, which results in an extremely thin 21mm LED panel that is fanless, making zero noise on set. Thinner, lighter, brighter, and quieter. These are the Van Gogh Ultra Slim RGBW panels by Swit.
There's an old saying, many hands make light work. This couldn't be more true than with the latest addition to our range of support accessories, the Ifootage Spider Crabs. An ingeniously designed set of support arms which go where you go, consistently and safely supporting your valuable equipment, providing you with the time, space, and freedom to create. Spider Crabs provide a reliable, modular system designed to support you, no matter where you find yourself working. This versatile system cleverly combines a variety of practical support options, providing you with even more creative choices and possibilities.
Action! Good. I need more passion. Camera up.
Turn up the heat and make those embers glow.
Beautiful.